Did you seriously think you could just move your parents into our house without even asking me, Brian? My voice trembled, a mixture of anger and disbelief shaking every word. My husband of 6 years barely glanced up from his laptop, his lips curling into that maddening smirk I had grown to resent. Oh, Jessica, stop being so dramatic. It's not a big deal. Besides, it's only temporary, he replied, his tone dismissive as though my opinion didn't even register. For a moment, I stood frozen, his words cutting deeper than I expected. Not a big deal, I repeated, my voice sharper now. This isn't just any house, Brian. This is my house. The charming four-story home nestled in a quiet suburb had been in my family for generations. My grandparents had passed it down to me, and I'd always dreamed of raising my own family here. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place to shield our 3-year-old son, Paul, from the toxic influence of Brian's controlling parents. Brian finally looked up, his smirk faltering for a split second before returning, weaker but still present. Let's be honest, he said with a shrug. It's not like you can stop it. His words landed like a slap. My fists clenched at my sides as I struggled to steady my breathing. You do remember this house is in my name, right? I shot back, my voice firm, though inside, I felt like a storm was brewing. For the first time in years, I questioned how well I truly knew the man I had married. The man who now seemed to think he could bulldoze my feelings as easily as closing the lid of his laptop. Before Brian could respond, Paul toddled into the room, his chubby little hands reaching up toward me. His wide, innocent grin broke through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Forcing a smile, I scooped him up, pressing a kiss to his forehead. I held him close, his tiny fingers playing with my necklace, as if to ground me in the moment. At least Paul was too young to understand the suffocating tension between his parents. Brian, this is not okay, I said finally, my voice steadier now, but still tinged with the hurt I couldn't hide. Your parents have never respected me or our space. Why are you doing this? Why now? Brian didn't even look up. They're family, Jessica. You wouldn't understand. The word family felt like a slap in the face. My family, the ones who had raised me with love and warmth, had always been my safe haven. My parents owned a small but beloved coffee shop in town, a place filled with laughter, kindness, and support, everything Brian's parents were not. His mother, Emma, and father, David, had been overbearing and dismissive since the day I met them. They made no effort to hide their disdain for me, treating me like an unwelcome guest in my own life. Don't talk to me about family, I snapped, my voice rising despite myself. Your parents have done nothing but make me feel like I don't belong. And now you think you can just move them in here without even asking me? Brian's shoulders tensed, but he still refused to meet my gaze. It's not permanent, he muttered. They just need a place to stay for a while. And what about what I need? I demanded. What about what's best for Paul? This is his home too. Do you think it's healthy for him to be around their negativities? Brian's silence spoke louder than words. He wasn't going to budge. In that moment, I realized that he didn't see this house as my sanctuary, our home, or a legacy I had inherited. To him, it was just a convenient place to assert control, just like his parents had always done. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I couldn't break down, not now, not in front of him. Instead, I pressed another kiss to Paul's forehead, silently vowing to protect him from the chaos Brian seemed determined to bring into our lives. Brian, I said quietly but firmly, if you go through with this without my consent, there will be consequences. I won't let you make me feel powerless in my own home. This time, Brian looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. Maybe he finally realized I wasn't going to back down. Or maybe he thought I was bluffing. Either way, I had made my position clear. This was my home, my safe haven, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, not even my husband. Just as I was about to respond, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. My stomach sank as I looked through the peephole. There they were, Brian's parents, standing on the porch with their suitcases, ready to take over our lives. Fine, I muttered under my breath, keeping my voice low so Paul wouldn't hear. Let them in, but this isn't over. Handing Paul to Brian, I opened the door. Emma swept past me without even saying hello, her strong perfume overwhelming the fresh scent of the house. David followed, his usual stern look making it clear he barely acknowledged me, just like he'd done since our wedding. Over the next few days, my worst fears came true. Emma started taking over every corner of my home. She rearranged my kitchen without asking, criticized my parenting at every chance, and acted like she owned the place. This cereal isn't healthy for Paul, she said one morning as I was preparing breakfast for my son. In our family, we believe in proper nutrition. You should learn something about it. It's just cereal, I replied, keeping my voice calm even though I wanted to snap. Paul is perfectly fine. Emma shook her head, her face full of disappointment, as if I had committed some terrible mistake. You're too lenient. No wonder he doesn't sleep through the night. That evening, I was tucking Paul into bed, humming softly to help him drift off, when Emma barged into the room without knocking. Still struggling to get him to sleep? She said, her tone full of judgment. Clearly, you're doing something wrong. I stared at her, my patience nearly gone. I'm doing the best I can, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. Well, maybe if you had a proper job, you'd have some structure in your life. She snapped back, her smile cold and condescending. This stay-at-home routine clearly isn't working for you. Anger surged through me. This is my house, Emma. You're a guest here. Don't forget that. She laughed, her tone sharp and dismissive.
Oh, dear.
Brian never mentioned how delusional you are. This is his house too. And as his mother, I have every right to be here. The next morning, I reached my breaking point when I found Emma in Paul's room, going through his drawers. What are you doing? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Organizing. This room is a mess, she replied casually, not even bothering to look up. That's it, I said, my voice rising as I struggled to stay calm. I want you out of my house.
Now?
Emma finally looked at me, her expression a mix of fake surprise and disdain. Your house? She sneered. Sweetheart, this is Brian's house too, and he wants us here. I stormed out of the room, my mind racing. Brian's betrayal and Emma's arrogance were too much to bear. This house was supposed to be my safe place, my sanctuary, and now it felt like a battleground. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I made a decision. I was done being their doormat. If they thought they could walk all over me, they were wrong. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I was going to take back control of my home, my life, and my future. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to stand up for myself. The next morning, I picked up my phone and called my brother, James. He had always been my rock, the one I could lean on when everything felt like it was falling apart. They're taking over my life, James, I said, my voice trembling as tears threatened to spill. I can't do this anymore. I feel like I don't even belong in my own home. James's voice was calm and steady, like always. Jessica, you need to stand up for yourself. Don't let them push you around like this. This is your house, your space. You have every right to demand respect.
His words sparked something inside me. He was right.
I had let them walk all over me for far too long. It was time to fight back. This time, I decided to approach things differently. I needed to gather my thoughts and prepare for the confrontation. Over the next few days, I made a list of everything Emma had done to cross the line. Her constant criticisms, her intrusion into Paul's routines, her rude comments about my parenting, and even her rearranging my kitchen without asking. With each item I wrote down, my resolve grew stronger. My determination grew stronger as the days passed. Finally, the day of the confrontation arrived. I waited until Emma and Brian were sitting in the living room, chatting as if nothing was wrong. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm as I walked into the room.
We need to talk.
Now, I said firmly, keeping my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Brian looked up from his phone, surprised by my tone. What's this about, Jessica? I took a deep breath. It's about your parents, Brian. Their constant interference, their complete disregard for my boundaries. It has to stop today. Emma let out a loud scoff, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to help. Help. I shot back, my voice rising. You're not helping. You're undermining me at every turn, treating me like a stranger in my own home. This is supposed to be a place of peace for my son and me, but you've turned it into a battleground. Brian shifted uncomfortably on the couch, clearly not expecting this confrontation. Jessica, they're my parents. We can't just ask them to leave. I locked eyes with him, my tone unwavering. No, Brian. They're guests in my home, and they've overstayed their welcome. Either they leave, or I do. And I'm taking Paul with me. The room fell silent. My ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Brian's face paled as he realized I wasn't bluffing. Emma, however, was less convinced. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, her usual smug expression cracking. I met her gaze, without flinching. Watch me. That night, Emma and David packed their bags. As they walked out the door, Emma turned to give me one last, venomous glare. You'll regret this, Jessica. But as the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The house was mine again, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The following days were quiet. Brian, however, grew distant. His interactions with me became cold and minimal, as though he blamed me for everything that had happened. But even with the strain in our relationship, I found comfort in the peace of my reclaimed home. The sound of Paul's laughter as he played freely again filled me with a sense of relief. One evening, as I sat watching Paul, I realized I had done the right thing. This was our home, our safe space, and I was ready to protect it no matter what. I was tidying up while Paul played with his building blocks when Brian spoke up unexpectedly. I have a business trip coming up.
I'll be gone for a few weeks, he said.
His tone was flat, almost indifferent, as if our strained relationship didn't matter. Fine, I replied curtly, trying to hide my relief at the thought of him being away. After Brian left, the house felt different. It felt lighter, freer. I started undoing all the changes Emma had made, restoring my home to the way I loved it. Each small victory felt like a step toward reclaiming not just my space, but also my confidence and independence. But then something happened I didn't expect. One evening, while cleaning, I noticed Brian's laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter. At first, I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen and froze. Right, there were emails that revealed he was having an affair. And it wasn't just a one-time mistake. It had been going on for months. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Waves of anger, hurt, and betrayal washed over me. The man I had once loved and trusted had not only let his parents walk all over me, but he had also been living a double life. This was the final straw. I closed the laptop and sat down, my mind racing. I couldn't ignore this. Brian had broken every promise, every vow, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I started planning my next steps, each one carefully thought out. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I explained everything, his parents' intrusion, the emotional toll it had taken on me, and now the affair. Together, we began the process of filing for divorce and securing my financial stability. Next, I contacted a real estate agent. I want to sell the house quickly and quietly, I told her, my voice firm. She hesitated. Jessica, are you sure? This is a big decision. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied. This house had once been my sanctuary, but now it was a reminder of everything I had endured. I needed a fresh start, a place where Paul and I could build a new life, free from Brian's betrayal and his family's toxicity. Offers for the house came in quickly, and with each one, I felt a sense of freedom. The thought of Brian coming back to find the house sold and his control over my life gone brought me bittersweet satisfaction. For the first time in years, I felt strong. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was taking back my life. I was standing up for myself and I was winning. After Brian left, I turned to the one place I knew I could find comfort, my family. Reconnecting with them felt like a lifeline in the storm. When my parents learned everything Brian had done, they were horrified. Their unwavering support gave me the strength I desperately needed. "We're here for you, Jessica, no matter what," my father assured me one evening as we sat on the porch. I watched Paul toddling around the yard, his innocent laughter reminding me of what truly mattered. I made a silent promise to protect his happiness no matter how hard the road ahead might be. Brian's return was looming, but I was no longer the same woman he had left behind. The pain and betrayal had only strengthened my resolve. I was ready to face him, armed not just with the truth, but with a plan to take back control of my life and create a better future for Paul and me. When the day finally came, tension hung in the air like a storm. I had rehearsed this moment over and over, imagining every possible reaction Brian might have. But when I heard his key turn in the lock, my heart raced. The door creaked open, and his voice echoed through the now unfamiliar space. "Jessica, I'm home," he called out casually, as if nothing had changed. I stepped out of the kitchen, my posture straight and my expression calm. "Welcome back, Brian. We need to talk." He glanced around, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the changes I had made while he was gone. "What's going on?" "The house looks different." I didn't flinch. "I sold the house, Brian. It's not ours anymore." His face twisted with disbelief. "You did what?" "You can't just sell our house without telling me." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "It's my house, Brian. And after what I found out, I don't think you have any say in it anymore." His composure faltered, but he tried to recover. "What are you talking about?" "The affair, Brian," I said evenly. "I know everything." For a moment, he was speechless, his face betraying a flicker of panic. Then he scoffed, trying to dismiss it. "Jessica, it's not what you think." I felt anger rising, but I kept my voice calm. "I think it's exactly what it looks like. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family." Brian's shock turned to anger. "You're overreacting. We can work through this." "No, we can't," I said firmly. "I've already filed for divorce." I handed him the papers, the weight of the moment sinking in. What followed was a blur of accusations, weak apologies, and desperate attempts to shift the blame. But I stood my ground. I was done letting him or anyone else control my life. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by someone selfish and unrecognizable. As Brian stormed out of the house, vowing to fight the divorce, I felt a strange mix of freedom and nervousness. I had taken the first step to reclaim my life, but I knew the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the reality of our separation became public. Brian's parents, once so overconfident and controlling, found themselves caught in the mess. They tried reaching out to me, but I refused to respond. I had cut ties with them completely, focusing only on Paul and the legal process. The day of the court hearing came with a heavy feeling I couldn't shake. Brian sat across the courtroom, looking defeated, as if the weight of his actions had finally hit him. When the judge granted the divorce and gave me custody of Paul, I felt a wave of justice and relief. After the hearing, Brian tried to ask for another chance. "You made your choice, Brian. Now live with it," I said, turning my back on him for the last time. The fallout from the divorce and the truth about Brian's affair rippled through his life. His reputation suffered, and the social circles his family once thrived in turned their backs on them. Emma and David, once so proud and judgmental, were now avoided by those who used to respect them. As I left the courthouse holding Paul's tiny hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't just the end of something painful, it was a new beginning. A fresh start for me and my son, free from lies and control. The future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape. Life after the divorce felt like stepping into the light after years in darkness. The house was sold, no longer a reminder of bad memories. My focus shifted to rebuilding our lives and running the coffee shop my family had cherished for years. It became more than a business to me. It was my safe haven and a source of pride. Still, Brian's shadow lingered. One evening, as I was closing the shop, I heard a familiar voice.
Turning around, I saw Brian.
He looked disheveled and desperate, nothing like the composed man I had once known. "Jessica, please, I need to talk to you," he said, his eyes searching mine for any trace of kindness. I hesitated, conflicted by the sight of him. "What do you want, Brian?" I asked, my tone guarded. "It's about the alimony and child support," he began, his voice low and full of embarrassment. I can't afford it." Brian started to speak, his voice shaky.
"My job."
I held up a hand to stop him. "Stop right there, Brian. Your choices brought you here. Paul and I won't suffer because of your mistakes." His shoulders slumped, but I refused to let his regret sway me. Seeing him struggle stirred no sympathy in me, only a quiet determination to keep moving forward. As I locked the shop and walked away, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My life, my happiness, and Paul's future were no longer tied to Brian or his family. This was our time to start fresh, and I wouldn't let anything hold us back again. "I've lost everything because of the scandal," Brian said, his voice trembling. "My parents, they're broke too." His words hit me like a cold splash of reality. The man who once seemed untouchable now stood in front of me, utterly defeated. I crossed my arms, keeping my face neutral. "That's not my problem, Brian. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." He took a shaky breath, his eyes pleading. "But, Jessica, I have nothing left. I'm begging you, for old time's sake." For a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity. His voice cracked, showing just how broken he was. But then the memories came rushing back. The lies, the betrayal, the nights I cried myself to sleep because of him. Any sympathy I felt was drowned out by the pain he had caused. "Old times sake?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "Those times are gone, Brian. You should have thought about the consequences before you cheated, before you lied." I turned to leave, ready to put him behind me once and for all. But his next words stopped me. "I'm sorry, Jessica." "Truly, I am," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I was a fool, and I ruined everything. Please help me." For a brief moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I had once loved. He looked vulnerable, regretful, even human. But the wounds he had left were too fresh, the scars too deep. I couldn't forget how he had betrayed me and turned my life upside down. "I'm sorry too, Brian," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "But I can't help you. You need to figure this out on your own." He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, a shadow of the man he used to be. As I strode toward the warmth and safety of my home, I felt a sense of closure. This was the beginning of a new chapter for Paul and me, and nothing was going to stop us from moving forward. I felt a new kind of peace. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the end of a painful story. I had finally let go. The journey hadn't been easy. It was filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and moments where I doubted myself. But it also brought me strength and independence. Life didn't stop. It kept moving forward, and so did I. Paul grew a little more every day. His laughter filled the house with joy, and his curiosity reminded me of the innocence and wonder the world still held. The coffee shop became more than just a business. It turned into a warm and welcoming place, a hub for friends and the community. Each morning, the smell of fresh coffee was a gentle reminder of how far I had come. As for Brian and his parents, they faded into the background of my life, becoming distant memories. Their legacy was nothing more than a cautionary tale, reminder of the harm caused by selfishness and betrayal. I no longer felt anger when I thought of them. Instead, I felt grateful for the lessons they taught me: resilience, the strength to stand up for myself, and the courage to keep moving forward. One evening, after a busy day at the shop, I locked the door and looked up at the sky. Shades of orange and pink stretched across the horizon, marking the end of another day. Paul reached for my hand, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine, and I smiled. "Ready to go home, buddies?" I asked. He nodded with a big grin. Our future wasn't perfect, and it wasn't fully clear, but it was bright. With every step we took, I felt more confident in the life we were building. It was a new chapter, A life built on strength, love, and the promise of better days ahead. As Paul and I walked home, hand in hand, I knew one thing for sure. We were moving forward, and nothing could hold us back.